Catherine?
Yes.
So my name is Megan, and I'm here today to talk to you about a serious and important issue that has been in the news a lot in the recent years. And there's been a trend of parents not vaccinating their children for various reasons and then sending them off to school, which is a place where the possibility of a disease being transferred is really high. And recently there have been an increasing number of reported diseases in the public school system that have virtually been wiped out with the discovery of the vaccine. And most recently there's been an outbreak of pertussis, with the most cases being reported in 50 years since the vaccine was discovered. So I'm here to prove that a federal policy making vaccinations mandatory for enrollment in the public school system is not unconstitutional. Now, before I get into whether or not this is an unconstitutional issue, I just want to give a brief overview of child vaccinations and the myths that go with them. And there are many reasons why parents say they choose not to vaccinate their kids, and I'm going to dispute them. One myth is that there is no longer a need to vaccinate against certain diseases because they're no longer considered a serious health risk. But this reasoning is illogical, and the reason that these diseases are no longer a serious health risk is because of medical advancement of vaccinations. Another myth that parents have is that they believe that even though they do not vaccinate their children, they will be protected if other children are vaccinated. This brings up the concept of something called herd immunity, which means that if enough people are vaccinated, they protect those who cannot be vaccinated for various reasons, such as medical reasons. However, there's a major flaw with this line of thinking, and herd immunity only works if all of those who are able to get the vaccine do receive it. So currently in the public school system, 15 out of 50 states, or 30% of states, allow exemptions from vaccinations for a child in the public school system, and these exemptions are either for religious or philosophical reasons. Some states make a parent prove that they are in an organized and recognized religion if they want their child to be exempt due to religious reasons, while other states, such as California, make it really easy and simply require a parent's signature on a paper stating for personal reasons that they don't want their child to be vaccinated. However, due to these exemptions, it was found that in 2010, in the Chicago public school system, 1 out of every 6 kids was unvaccinated, and this is according to the Medill reports in Chicago. And as a personal example, my mother is a high school teacher at a public high school, and due to her exposure to so many children, is always up to date on her vaccinations. However, even though she was vaccinated for measles, her body is resistant to the antibodies in the vaccine. Therefore, even though she is vaccinated, she is susceptible to the disease. So if one of her students came down with the measles, she has a high chance of catching it. So if all the school children she came in contact with had the vaccine, her exposure would be greatly diminished. Now, the constitutionality of a policy of making vaccinations mandatory for the public school system is a really touchy subject. However, parents send their children to a public school system expecting it to be a safe environment, including safe from diseases. And in 2004 and 2005, a study done by the Center for Health and Healthcare in Schools found that in schools that had exemptions to the vaccination policies, there was a 90% greater chance of greater incidence of pertussis, which is also known as whooping cough, than in schools that did not allow exemptions. Now, people argue that public school requirements of vaccinations is government interference with individual rights, and that it is similar to compelled medication by the government. However, the government is not forcing any parent to vaccinate their child. They're saying that if a parent wants their child to be enrolled in a public school system, that child needs to be vaccinated. So parents still have the option of sending their children to a private school. Now, there's also an argument that such a policy would be an infringement upon First Amendment rights of freedom of personal belief. And in 1979, a man challenged a Mississippi school's denial of admittance of his child because his child had not had any of the required medications or required vaccinations due to his religious beliefs. And in the court case of Brown versus Stone, a Mississippi Supreme Court ruled that it was not unconstitutional for a school to refuse enrollment of a student who had been unvaccinated due to religious views, because it discriminates against the great majority of children whose parents have no such religious convictions. Those children who are vaccinated should not be punished nor exposed to an unvaccinated children simply because they do not share the same religious views. So in conclusion, people expect that when they send their kids to a public school, it will be a safe environment. And our constitutional rights are not being taken away by a federal policy. Parents still have options in where they want to send their kids. And having exemptions to vaccine requirements hurts the vast majority of kids. The Constitution is all about protecting people's rights, and that includes the right to go to school and not worry about acquiring a disease from an unvaccinated child. Thanks.
All right. The setup on the controversy, I think, is okay. You might want to give us a source citation on the pertussis issue at the beginning. Later on, you do in the body of the speech, but since you've got that early on, it wouldn't hurt. Your claim is focusing on the constitutionality of this, and so that's really ultimately what the supporting points should be about. And I only had one of the supporting points that seemed directly relevant to that, although there are a couple of ways in which those other points are connected to it because of the way the court ruled on this particular issue. I think you need a clear setup of what the secondary structure is going to be. You did an okay job signposting as you got to some of those points. Numerical signposting is not a bad idea, but I could usually tell what the argument was and what the claim was that you're making at any given time. You really don't get to the constitutionality issue for the first 3 minutes of the speech. It's a 4-minute, 48-second speech. So for the first 3 minutes, it's all background information, discussion of what the risk issues are, and the constitutionality issue, which is the main premise of your proposition, is kind of been pushed aside. Now, you do have the Mississippi court ruling, and you've got your explanation about how the court is ruling on this particular issue. And I thought you did a pretty good job talking about that. I don't know if the Mississippi rules are different than other states, and if there have been any federal appeals on this. I think that you would want to get some additional authorities talking about this in other districts or in other states as well. Like I said, the explanation that you gave about it seems to be pretty reasonable, that they're not being punished, they're not being forced to get immunized. They are just, if they want access to the schools, they need to get immunized. There's a question about whether such government coercion would constitute a violation of a parent's rights or the rights of a student, and I think that's where the argument needs to be developed a little bit more. The fact that Mississippi held that it wasn't a violation or it wasn't coercive enough, I think is a good point. Like I said, it just seemed a little bit thin on everything else. Now, the justifications for immunizations, I think you do a good job explaining what all of those are. It seemed like you rushed a little bit, but everything was clearly explained. All right, thank you.